All right, great. All right, so good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining our little webinar here today. My name is Tom Zabo, Staff Solutions Architect here at VMware, focus on our cloud management platform. Topic of today is Aria Operations, formerly known as vRealize Operations, and we're going to specifically focus on alerts. I'm also joined by my counterpart, Tony. Tony, you want to just introduce yourself real fast?
Yeah, my name is Tony Westergum. I am the solutions engineer architect for the Mid-Atlantic region for the cloud management business unit.
Great. Thanks for joining here today, Tony. I appreciate it. So, for anyone that hasn't joined before, this is something we call a Powerblock cloud conversations. It's known by a couple of different terms internally at VMware. But the idea is to pick a topic and dig a little deeper into it. Try to avoid, going too heavy with marketing and actually look at a specific function of one of our products. So, what we're going to do today is just do a walkthrough of a few slides, just going through alerts, what they are, some methodologies, some things to think about. It would actually probably help if I advance my slides, look at the agenda. So we're going to talk about, what an alert is from an Aria operations perspective, how to potentially tune them, where to view, how to control them, and really, the idea is to jump into one or two of our environments and really take a look at, where you can see alerts. We'll be able to build an alert. We have a list of resources. I always like to have, some resources that we can send out after the call that you all can use to either for reference material, to dig a little bit deeper as you're working potentially through alerts in your own environments. But we have some resources that should hopefully be relevant. Also, if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A. We will try to answer anything that comes up. If for some reason we can't get to you, we can see your email address. We will follow up after the call, just to make sure any questions that you have are answered. I also forgot, I do have a poll, Tony. Throw this up. I'm just curious for anybody that's on the call today, if you're using alerts in Aria Operations today. Like we've got a few marking off yes, good. All right, a couple of no's.
Three alerts. How do we know?
I forgot that and yes, I am recording, and I will send out a link to the recording after the call as well. All right, so far, for those that have responded, it looks like we have a mix, 50-50 mix of yes and no. So hopefully the folks that are using alerts will get something out of what we're about to show today. And for anyone that isn't using alerts, hopefully we can hopefully we'll pique your interest and get a chance to give you some ideas of what you could potentially do with the platform. All right, so starting here, Tony, do you want to just take us through a little bit of the anatomy of an alert from an Aria operations perspective, and what actually makes up an alert?
Absolutely. So alerts and VROPs or Aria operations are a little bit different than vCenter. When you go into vCenter, pretty much everything is laid out for you, and you just really have to enable it and maybe add your email address or anything like that, or maybe just change around percentages and things like that. For me, when I got to Aria operations, I kind of looked at it and was like, this seems really odd to me. So I had to kind of really break it down into an analogy, because I can be thick as a brick sometimes. So the way I looked at it, it was like an alert definition. You can think of it as like an envelope or a bill that you'll get in the mail. So the alert definition itself is really just a wrapper around the alert itself, right? So the symptom definition, that's the cause of the alert. So let's say CPU is greater than 90%, memory is greater than 90%, and so on. So think of that as like the bill that you pull out of the envelope, right? So it gives you the information about why you're getting this alert or this mailing. Recommendations, they're optional, but it's like a suggestion that we have some canned, and there's also suggestion or recommendations that you can create that kind of help. Let's say if these alerts are going to a help desk overnight, you could say, okay, if you're getting an alert for CPU over 90% for this VM, let's say one of the recommendations can be, okay, take a look at services to see if they're hung, instead of just, dialing the phone right away and saying, hey, let's get the on-call person. We're getting an alert for 90% or a, disk space at 2% type of alert. So the recommendation, if you go back to that bill idea, is you need to pay the bill by this date, right? And also, as part of recommendations, you can allow actions as well. So action is also another optional part of a recommendation, where let's say an action could be you can click on a button and it'll add a CPU on its own, or add more memory, with a couple of caveats in there. It definitely will ask you, is it okay if hot add isn't enabled? Is it okay to reboot the box? Do you want to take a snapshot before doing this action? So we kind of have you guys covered with that. So the action part, if you want to go back to my analogy, is you can pay the bill. You can either pay it with a recommendation of sending a check, or if you want to use an action, hey, go to the website and pay the bill right now. So hopefully that gives you a better understanding of the idea around an alert in Aria Operations versus vCenter. Tom?
Yeah, thanks, Tony. One thing I'll add is that, having worked with quite a few different customers, taking advantage, just starting to use Aria Operations, vRealize Operations over the years. Sometimes, when we look at an alert, it can be a little overwhelming, as far as, symptoms and how they, what the impact type is, what it's actually impacting. But when you start to really understand, and I love Tony's analogy of just, hey, it's an envelope with, some different things inside, a bill, an action that you can take. It allows you to really fine tune what it is that you're really trying to alert yourself about, right? In your environment, everyone's environment is slightly different. You have different thresholds and metrics that are important. So, once you understand how things work and how things tie together, you can really fine tune your alerts to avoid false positives, get away from the scenario where, you have so many email alerts firing that you end up just creating an Outlook rule, put all those alerts in a folder, and once every 3 months, you're going in there and doing a select all and deleting them. That's exactly what we are avoiding with Aria Operations, where you can tune this to show you what's important in your environment. So here, we wanted to just make sure that we can show an idea of what what an alert would look like, right? So if anybody's ever looked at the metrics inside of vRealize Operations, and I keep saying vRealize, so I'm gonna owe some money into our naming convention jar at the end of this call. Aria Operations, right?
We have to set up like a chat GPT thing that will automatically change VROPs to Aria.
Yeah, exactly. So here, even though it says vSandy I05, this is actually a virtual machine. So I'm assuming in this example we were running an embedded hypervisor. So just a quick idea. You could see CPU usage for this virtual machine is at 100%. The demand is over 100%. So in this case, what that really means is, hey, the VM it's busy, right? It's using 100% of the CPU, but it's actually asking for more resources from the underlying host. So what's going to happen in that scenario? You're going to have contention, right? It's not receiving the resources that it's actually asking for. So this is an example of a fairly simple, and I don't know why this highlighter is on. Hold on. A fairly simple alert where hey, ops is seen. All right, we're at 100% CPU utilization. It's asking for more. We have a problem, and it's been at an extended for an extended period of time. So let's fire off an alert and make you as the administrator aware of the fact that we have high CPU usage and we will be running into contention, right? So just like Tony was saying on that anatomy of an alert, here are the details. All right, what's the object? So there's the virtual machine. Some details on the alert. There's the symptom that's fired. So, sustained CPU usage. There's a recommendation. There are actually two here. This is kind of obvious, right? Check processes running on virtual machine to see if they are hung and need to be restarted. You can consume out of the box recommendations or build your own, depending on, hey, any type of particular steps or actions that you want somebody to take. We'll take a look at this in one of our lab environments in a minute, where you can actually look at related alerts. So maybe look and see, hey, how many times has this alert happened in the past 30 days? Do we have peers to this virtual machine that have these alerts? And then potential evidence starts to get into our troubleshooting workbench, where you can dig in and start to understand, hey, what are the underlying causes for, this particular alert that's happening? All right, so getting into tuning, Tony and I shamelessly stole this from, from a blog called VM Ignite. Lan Nguyen, we're both big fans of the work that he's done as far as, just blogging, creating videos, and bringing awareness to, just how to operate and how to use Aria Operations to, and take advantage of the full functionality. And the reason why we like this graphic is it really does call to attention, and Tony, jump in here wherever you want, what we think is a really just good methodology, good process to think about when you do start to think about, hey, maybe I want to start using alerts inside of Aria Operations. Going back to the poll, it looked like half of the respondents aren't currently using it. So what we typically say is, all right, hey, start by understanding, some of the out of the box alerts that are available, right? There's literally thousands of them. And when you first,
instead of just scrolling through these things, I would recommend using the filter. It took me forever to just stop scrolling and just type in the filter criteria search for not only tuning or alerting, but really everything in Aria Operations is awesome, because as you said, thousands of alerts. Let's say I only want to see CPU. Well, I'm just going to type in CPU and it'll give you the listing there. It makes life so much easier. Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, no, that is a great point. Much easier to understand what's available. So, I would say that no one knows every one of those alerts off the top of their head, right? So right. Part of it is just understanding what's there, and then understanding, no one knows your environment better than you do, right? What is important? What key applications do you have? What virtual machines are hosting those applications, right? And that's what this is, kind of representing here, is we can group alerts, and, when you get into how you want to visualize them, and we'll take a look at this as we jump into one of my labs, is, you can look at alerts via dashboards. That's probably the most common way to consume data inside of Aria Operations, right? We can also have, tickets created, use webhooks to interact with, other systems. If, let's say, you're using something like Jira, for example, maybe you just want the standard old school, give me an email, or, maybe you want to have a text message for, critical alerts. We have an ESXi host down, for example. We want to be aware of it. The type of alert where you will walk out of a meeting, you'll disconnect from this webinar because there's a real issue, right? So there's different levels of alerts and different levels of concern, if you will, in any environment, right? Some examples right here, awareness. All right, hey, if a VM has old snapshots, that's not great. You might start to see some performance degradation, right? Something to be addressed, but is it something that you need to wake up in the middle of the night and log in and commit a snapshot? Probably not, right? It's something you put on your list when, you have some time and you want to start, cleaning up an environment and getting ahead of a potential problem, right? Lowering your risk, where, health is more, hey, we've got something down, we need to address this right now.
Yeah. And again, going back to the critical alerts, you can do a lot of grouping, especially if you're tagging. Let's say you have enterprise tier 1 level machines that you really need to know what's happening. like your host, for example. So yeah, like Tom said, you can create alerts specifically for those hosts or that grouping that will send, let's say, a text alert, because no one that I know was really taking a look at email, on a Saturday night. But if you're getting hit with like a major problem, definitely having an alert sent to your phone, you're gonna, pick it up and take a look before you get the call from the help desk or from whoever's on the pager that day. You know, so it's much better to get it immediately, and then you can stop what you're doing and hop on and start working on the problem.
Yep,
And
absolutely.
we'll show you that later.
Yep. All right, let's take a look at how we can tune some of that alert behavior. A key piece of it is via policy. So, every Aria operations instance is going to have, at a minimum, a single default policy that gets created once, when it's stood up, when you start to use the service in the case of SaaS, where you're not actually doing an install, right? So, policies provide quite a bit from a base settings and just understanding of what's actually happening. So you can control, metrics and properties that are being collected. If you get into super metrics, being able to enable those metrics, super metrics on specific objects, your capacity modeling, any type of compliance concerns that you have. So the policy is really how you tune, the overall settings. But specifically here with what we're talking about, you'll notice there's an alert and symptoms section of the policy. So this is where you can control things like, hey, do we want an alert to even be activated? Maybe we just want to deactivate specific alerts because we know it's either just generating false positives, it's not important. Rather than editing the alert inside of operations itself, making a change to the definition, you can actually just deactivate the alert in the policy itself. And symptoms as well, which make up alerts, we'll take a look at that in a minute. You can control the thresholds as far as, let's just say if a symptom is, hey, we want to flag a VM as critical if it goes over 95% CPU utilization, maybe in our dev test environment, that's okay. So we want to, adjust the threshold somewhat. So it's probably a high number to use as an example, but just something off the top of my head. So policy is where you can control what alerts are actually activated, and then thresholds for symptoms.
Right. And once we get into the demo, we'll show you where that is too. In
Yep.
case you guys don't know. Because when you look at Aria operations, you see so much and you're like, oh my God, where is everything? Where do I even start? But we'll go from the alerting and then go from there.
Yeah, got it. And what I'll throw out is I don't necessarily recommend having too many policies. It can, you can easily make it more complex for yourself than you would necessarily want. But just using that, what I was saying earlier about dev test versus prod, everybody has different pieces of their environment where or different workloads, for example, where there's just different thresholds, and you have more importance on specific workloads. So that's where you would have different policies depending on what your intent is for what you're monitoring. All right.
Put on your bathing caps. It's time to jump into the water.
All right. Let's just make sure I didn't time out of anything. I have two environments open today because I wanted to show a couple of different examples, borrowing one of our counterparts labs as well. All right, so hopefully everyone can still see Aria Operations. What you see here is an on-prem instance running inside of one of my labs. So we're going to walk through a couple of different places where, number one, where do you actually, where can you see any active alerts inside of your environment? So, left-hand side, it's categorized underneath troubleshoot. We have an alerts category. So these are every active alert. You can see I'm currently filtered by status active inside of my environment. So there's a bunch of different things that we can see here. One, criticality. Is it, I have a health critical issue here. There's basically 3 different options. There's health, there's risk, and what is the third one? Why am I drawing a blank on that? And efficiency. So health is something that, hey, this is an immediate problem. Risk is, you may be heading to a problem, and then efficiency is, hey, we're just trying to keep our, control our capacity, keep our environment as, as lean and mean as we possibly can, right? So, just grouping by criticality, for example, what the alert actually is, what object it's triggered on, and you can see here, this is a virtual machine, this is a group of VMs, a host, a group of IIS web servers, some SQL servers. So depending on how you're grouping your objects, I use custom groups heavily, which is why you're seeing some of them coming up here. When was it created? You can see I've clearly been neglecting this alert for some time. Alert type, alert subtype. We'll talk a little bit more about the types and the subtypes. That type of categorization comes down to when you want to be able to filter alerts to a specific type of object or alert, and for notification rules as well, you can really say, all right, hey, give me notification on a specific type or subtype rather than everything in the environment. And then finally, we have this tab over here, importance. So this is I believe we added this in vRealize Operations 8.6. So what we're actually doing is we're giving weight to rare alerts or frequently accessed objects. So right now, I'm not grouping my alerts by any criteria whatsoever. It's just every alert in my environment. But you can see there is an importance score on the different alerts. When I'm doing demos, and I do a lot with this particular virtual machine, this is why it, in my case, is flagging it as frequently accessed object and putting it at the top of my my screen here, just so I can get my eyes on it.
Right, and if you click on that eye there, it'll give you a brief summary of what it means.
Yeah, that is a great call out, Tony. Something else to just always be aware of is, look for in-product help, where you could just hover over something and it'll give you an idea of, hey, what am I looking at here? And always, anytime you see this little question mark up here, if you click that, it's going to bring you to our documentation, but rather than just dumping you at the top and saying good luck, it's going to give you information that's focused on, hey, what are we looking at on this page? What can we do with what we actually have at our attention right now, which I find really, really helpful, even for myself when I've been using this for years. So, and then you could see we can actually start to group by specific criticality, for example, immediate, so group by the how important the alert is, group by time, group by definition, by object type. So you can start to, understand, hey, where do we have problems and where are we seeing different scenarios? I'm going to jump over to Brock's here, different Aria Operations instance, to show you 2 things. One, this is an example of a custom dashboard where we actually have an alert widget. So you can see where we've got some alerts, inside of a dashboard itself. And then from there, now it's more actionable, where you can click a particular alert and start to see, all right, here's the virtual machine, and start to understand what's related to that VM. So again, depending on, if you're grouping by application, for example, you can, if you see an alert on a VM, you can quickly understand, oh, this is associated with, application A, for example, and, this is important, right? My hospital, my business relies on this particular application. Maybe I better put some eyes on what's going on here. And the other reason why we wanted to come into his environment is one of an example of, so this is, a VM is high in CPU memory alert that we have firing here. So we're going to click into this. And this is, we're actually looking at the alert itself. So again, what object is it firing on, the alert, when did it start? And here's some alert details. So these are conditions, so very similar to symptoms, but more or less a one-off on something that's happening in, that you can create in the alert itself. We're going to walk through an alert, and I'll explain this a little better in a minute. What I really wanted to show here was a couple of things. One, you can see that this is a set of conditions that, once, if all of those conditions are met, so we're basically looking for, fire the alert if all of these conditions are met. So that's part of how you can really tune what's happening and being able to say, all right, hey, look for memory usage over 80%. It's not in a particular cluster, and it's a member of a specific host, fire this alert. From there,
when you're building these things out, the all and any, if you can think of and or, if you're, an old SQL guy like me, that's generally the same idea.
Yes, that's a great point. And then from here, these are one of the recommendations. So, in this case, check VM to verify why the CPU memory is high and create a ticket. And we have a button where we can actually take a step right now if we wanted to. I'm not going to, because I don't know whose workload this is, where we can either take the recommendations that, sorry, my mouse is giving me some grief. We could either take the recommendations that Aria Operations is creating for us. All right, we currently have 2 CPUs. It's saying just leave it at 2 CPUs, but add memory, right? There must be some kind of lack of, a memory shortfall on this particular VM. So we can either take the recommendations, edit it to whatever we see fit. Maybe we want to go up to 8 gigs, for example. And then we can actually say, hey, if hot add is not enabled, and Tony mentioned that earlier, we can allow a power off. We can also take a snapshot prior to making those changes. If we click begin action here, it's going to make a, basically a call out to the center to, snapshot the VM, power it off, change the memory, and boot it back up. One thing, just before I click off of this to call out. So this is obviously, you're taking a manual step here. One of the things that we alluded to on the anatomy of an alert screen is that you can start to use, for example, vRealize Orchestrator to actually automate responses to specific alerts. Obviously, that's a kind of a more advanced step in the process, right? You definitely want to get your alerting, understand what you're alerting on and how things are working prior to starting to automate responses to alerts. But that is where you can potentially take alert responses in Aria Operations.
Tom, can you click on the related alerts too over here? So going on what we were speaking about earlier, if you ever take a look at, alerts, you'll see that there's thousands and thousands in there, and we'll show you how to reduce that size down in a little bit. But you may want to keep at least 30 days specifically for what Tom's pointing on right now. It's interesting to find out, how many reoccurrences of this alert has happened over the last 30 days. Could have been that we added CPU, a week ago, and now we're adding it again. So let's see, is there a more broad problem? Is there a problem with the application that's hanging processes or something like that? Or is it just, we're just kind of doing what we're doing correctly, which is just adding as much as a VM needs. And you can also see, going down that list, you can see, are there any other alerts on peer objects? And in this case, peer object would be other VMs. So you can see, yeah, we have a bunch of them, and then, we can do what we need to do.
Yeah, Tony, this having this many alert, the same high CPU memory, this almost tells me, we'd have to actually dig in. But if I saw this in my environment, I would almost have to say, like, hey, maybe maybe whatever my standard build isn't adequate, right? If it's all memory, maybe we just need to build a slightly larger VM out of the gate rather than having to, come back in and right size after the fact, right? Obviously, you'd have to dig into that, but that's again, the type of information that's being
right. And maybe on the flip side, your your criteria is a little too low. You know, maybe
Yeah, yep.
maybe you don't need to send an alert at 60% CPU utilization. Who cares? You know, it's more about being over 80%, I would say, before you start really paying attention to a problem.
Yeah, that's another great point. And then we also have potential evidence where, we can start to see, hey, based on the scope here, do we have any particular changes, any, anomalous metrics, anything that we're seeing out of the ordinary? So in this case, it looks like the number of Windows VM, well, it's increased by 1. That really shouldn't have caused the CPU issue, but you never know. Maybe there's more VMs. Again, you can dig in. We can launch troubleshooting workbench from here and start to try to understand why are we seeing this, and especially, why are we seeing it across so many objects?
Yeah, and that term anomaly really hits home for me as to why I think Aria operations alerts are quote unquote better than vCenter alerts or SCOM alerts or Slack alerts, because what's happening is over about 3 weeks or so, a trend is being built. So that, let's say you have a VM that runs a batch job from 9 p.m. to 9:15 that spikes CPU 100% for that 15 minutes only during the day. Well, all those other alert mechanisms will send an alert. Whereas with Aria operations, after a few weeks of understanding the trend, it will not send an alert at that time period because it says, hey, that's just normal behavior of this VM. However, if that same alert triggers at say like 1 p.m. or 1 a.m. or 2 a.m., you're going to get an alert on that and that time only. So I like that idea because you're not getting just these alerts all the time. You're only getting alerts when you have it set up the way you want it set up. You're only getting alerts for when there is a problem.
Okay. All right, so let me jump back here. So what we wanted to take a look at were a couple of other ways to start to understand, obviously looking at, every alert in the environment, grouping it, that can start to give you a really good idea on, what's firing, what kind of alerts are you running into inside of your environment. We also have different views, and you can also certainly, create your own custom views. But for example, here we have a, top critical alerts summary view that's here. So, what you can use this for is to start to understand, what's actually firing in the environment, how many resources are affected, what do you have going on? Like, hey, data store running out of disk space, that's definitely a critical alert. I've got some objects down. Clearly my lab's a mess, Tony. You got to help me here. So, but to give you an idea, and you can easily, you can edit this. So I think out of the box, it's set to show the, 7 per page. So if you want to, bump that up higher, you can. It's set by default over the past 7 days.
Yeah, but this is a good place to start, winnowing down your alerting to see what you find necessary and what you don't find necessary. So if you hopped over to Brock's lab, we'll see a lot more information out of that same view, and probably what you guys would see in your environment, because this is a little bit bigger of a lab. So here you can see, we're getting, 150 alerts for this VM is high in CPU memory. Maybe take a look at that one. Just make sure that it's hitting the filter criteria that you find necessary, or maybe not. Maybe you need to tweak that a little bit, and things like that. Obviously, the guest file system less than 2 gigabytes. That's an important one. I would probably keep that one, and probably take a look at those 111 too.
Yeah. So again, just at a glance, being able to get a feel for what's firing and what the extent of the scope of it is. And right now we're, the preview source, we're basically focused on everything. You can also narrow it down if you wanted to. And the views are available at every object type too. So, if you were looking at a specific cluster, a data center, even a host, you would have the same look and feel, just at a more narrowed focus.
have a question coming in from one of our attendees. Is there a way to determine what Aria has learned is normal or okay to ignore? Main concern is, let's say you've had VROPS running for a while and it's learned it's okay that CPU is spiked to 100% for this time, and now you don't get alerted for it, but maybe you want to know and should take action to remediate. I would, in that case, I would probably have, if you go back to that first dashboard that you had, Tom, the on the home screen, the overview, the environment overview. So we can either do that one, or I want to say in there's another overview section that has, and I'll forward this to you, but there's another dashboard that will have really everything that's occurring at this moment. So in my mind, I think of, and going back to Lon's slide, for like say snapshots and things like that, to me, it's nice to have alerts for that, but guess what? That's why we have these pretty dashboards. Why not have that in front of you and start doing some proactive things before you get that alert? So that's where I'd probably go with really the entire environment. To me, alerts are for specific purposes, for your overall environment, and making sure everything's running as fine-tuned as possible. I would probably go with just monitoring my dashboards.
Yep. Yeah, I agree with that. And just to take a look, let me show you an example. So this is a custom dashboard. So basically what I'm doing here is I'm using service discovery inside of Aria Operations, and then I'm creating custom groups based on services that I see running. So hey, servers that are running SSH, my AD servers, my Nginx servers, some web servers, and now using an alert widget here, based on the group that I'm looking at. So here's my Nginx servers. These are the VMs, the alerts that are active just inside of that group. And then from there, now because you have all, everything at your fingertips, you can start to look and understand, and getting to some of what Tony was saying about, thresholds, being able to look at what's normal. And CPU usage is a great example where usage is fine as long as we're not seeing any contention, right? It's actually receiving the resources that it's asking for. So you can use the metrics that are collected and that are being generated to start to understand, hey, is this okay? If you're curious and want to dig in a little bit deeper beyond just what Ops is learning.
And to me, the contention side of our metrics is more for the admin team, the VM admin team, because that when you're getting into contention, you're having issues with the actual physical hosts, not the VMs underneath it. Most application owners are more concerned about their CPU usage, their memory usage, and so on. But when you start seeing contention issues, then that's more of a host issue. That's your problem, not the application owner's problem.
Yeah, great point.
And Tom, if you switch over to Brock's thing and do a search on the dashboard VM details, this is what I was looking at.
Oh yeah, I know. Which
V5 all the way down. So here, this is something that you could have up all the time if you want to, and it'll repaint, it'll show you what's going on right now with top X CPU usage in your environment and so on. So this is something that's available to you guys to use and just have up there so you can see what's going on, at least during regular business hours. And if you have want to have the NOC take a look, have this on one of their TV screens, then go for it.
Great call out. All right, so we took a look, so this is an example of, like I was saying, just a widget inside of a dashboard where you can, see the alerts that are more focused to, in this case, a custom group. Let's take a look at how we actually start to configure some of this. So first, we're going to take a quick look at policies. So under configure policies, this is where your policy definitions are defined. And you can see down here, here's where I have, that default policy that was created. Stood this up back in August of 2021. And here's a custom policy that is, inheriting the settings from that particular policy. So if we click into it, we can click edit policy, and we can actually go in and start to look at, let's say we want to look at virtual machine, help if I could spell. There we go. Something that Tony called out earlier, always remember, you can start to just type when you want to find something, from a filtering perspective. That way you don't have to remember exactly what maybe you don't know exactly what you're looking for, but you want to just look virtual machine, and then, hey, I want to see, any alerts that are firing, that are activated from, or that are available that have CPU in it, right? So now you can see I've got some that are activated, some that are deactivated, and these are all inherited from that higher level policy that I basically just, when I created this, it pulled in those settings. We can deactivate it at this level if we say, hey, we don't care about, being alerted if there's CPU contention due to long IO events, which it is currently deactivated. If we wanted to turn it on, we could. You could see, how many symptoms or conditions are associated with that alert. And you can also see if this is where, like I mentioned earlier, where you can actually start to automate responses to alerts. You can also control whether it's going to be an automated response or not.
Right.
And then the symptom definitions, which this will probably make more sense when we actually build an alert, which we're going to do next. This is where we can come in and start to, if we wanted to actually edit thresholds. Like right now, this is a, basically just, if it was active, it would be firing if we had 100% packet loss, using the ICMP ping adapter inside of Aria Operations to ping any virtual machine that this policy is associated with. If I wanted to say, rather than 100% packet loss, I wanted to just drop it down to 90%, I can adjust those thresholds right here. All right, now we're going to take a look at configure and alerts themselves. So when you start to configure an alert, there's a bunch of different, you can see these are all the different components that make up that alert that we talked about earlier. You've got your outbound settings. So this is where we would define, let's just click into it. How do we want to get these alerts out of Aria Operations if we wanted to send it, via email to another system, to Slack, to ServiceNow? We've got plugins that you can create an instance that says, all right, hey, I want to define my SM host, right? So you define your mail host here. Just gonna cancel out of this. You can configure templates as far as the type of data that is actually sent when there's an outbound notification. You can define the notifications themselves. So in this case, I have a bunch of alerts going to Slack. Let's go into this and take a look. So, the name of the notification. And then now this is where we can define the criteria as far as what type of alerts that we actually want sent out. So again, do I want my Slack channel filled with every bit of, info, warning, immediate alerts? Probably not. So in this case, I'm just looking for any object that has a health critical alert. Let me know, send it out my Slack plugin. I have it, defined as far as how to tie into that particular instance, and then what template I actually send out. And you could see you can do one-offs where, if you want to go on creating recommendations, actions, different symptom definitions, and this is where we actually create our alerts themselves. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through creating an alert where this was something I worked on with a customer a little while back, where what they wanted to do, they wanted to be able to go beyond just basic up-down alerts, right? You know, like, yeah, can you ping, and if a VM isn't responding to a ping, could you say it's down? Sure, but maybe it's an issue. So what they wanted to do was say, all right, well, we're collecting a lot of information about these VMs. Maybe we can be a little bit more sophisticated with our alerts. So they wanted to create an alert that checked to see, for virtual machines, are my VM tools running? If they're not, and we're getting 100% packet loss, then we can consider this VM down, right? Because if you just look at, you know, your VM tools, they might be stopped for any number of reasons, but the VM is still up. And just like I was saying earlier, you might not be receiving a ping, but it could just be a network isolation event. It could be any number of reasons why a VM isn't responding to a ping, Windows firewall, you know, any number of reasons. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new alert. So one thing that Tony and I will always recommend is prepend it with your initials, name of your company, something so that you can call out and know that this is a custom alert. So we're just going to say TS.
Yeah, and the biggest reason why is because during an upgrade, chances are it'll be overwritten if you don't, you know, create it separate from what the, you know, if you're cloning off of a another alert, another report, another dashboard, another view, anything in operations, in Aria operations that you're doing custom. If you're using something as a template, you need to clone it before you do anything and then name it appropriately.
Yep, you got it. Yeah, it's a very good point. Is anything that's out of the box, clone it. Don't just change any alerts from there. All right, so put in a description. Definitely recommend that too. So in case you forget what you did, like I have a tendency to do. And then we're looking for, all right, what's the base object? So in this case, we're alerting on virtual machines. Advanced settings, this is where you can start to control, you know, the impact. Is it health related? What do we actually want to file it as from a critical perspective? Do we want to just get it from the symptom itself, or do we want to say, you know, this alert is a critical alert? We have a problem. We can categorize it. You know, in this case, we'll consider it, even though it's a VM, we'll say application availability, because it's going to affect, you know, whatever application is running on that particular virtual machine. The wait cycle and the cancel. So this is how you can control how frequently the alerts are firing and how long a specific event or threshold has to occur. So each cycle is a 5-minute wait time. Well, one cycle is 5 minutes. So basically, wait cycle says, all right, let's see if we detect this over 5 minutes, fire the alert. And cancel cycle is, all right, if in 5 minutes the symptoms and conditions that we're about to define go, you know, clear up, then clear the alert. So now, all right, we have the alert defined as far as a name and some, you know, some settings around what it actually impacts. All right, what do we want to define? So we have conditions and symptoms. Symptoms are, you know, they exist, so you can use them in more than one alert. Conditions are, you know, just off. We want to just use it inside of this alert, and we're not planning on reusing it again someplace else. We could just create another condition if we wanted to. So what we're going to do is we're going to first find a symptom, and we're going to do search for tools. So we could see, all right, we have a symptom of VMware tools is running. So we're going to drag that over here, and you can actually invert a symptom. So if we read this correctly, this is just saying, all right, if summary guest operating system tools are running, guest tools is running, that's just info. So we want the reverse. We want to know if it's not running. And then from there, we're also going to look at peak packet loss. Drag this over. Maybe drag that over. There we go. If peak packet loss is equal to 100, we'll mark that as critical. So now basically we're looking to say, alert us if VMware Tools is not running and we've got peak packet loss of 100%. Now we could also add in, are we looking for it off, powered on? Let's avoid templates. You can really start to customize exactly what you want to have, all your symptoms lined up to create that symptom set to alleviate and eliminate any false positives. And you can see here it's triggered when all of these particular criteria and conditions are true. From there, we can add in recommendations, or we can create a new recommendation. Let's do, I think we have a check for network connectivity issues using ping or by trace route. You can add that in there. I once had a customer, and this is amusing, Tony. He did a create new condition and basically said, do not panic. And applied that to all of his alerts. And again, the idea is just to, put some information in there for others that are using the platform. So,
stay calm and carry on.
Yeah. Rule 1 of IT is don't panic, right? And then the next step here is, all right, what policy do you want to activate it on? Rather than having to manually, like we were looking at the policies earlier, we can just fire it off and say, all right, we want this active in this custom policy from the get-go. Once I click create, should be in here. Hold on, maybe I gotta do my filter a little better. There we go. TS VM dash availability. That's what I just created. So there we go.
Okay.
All right. So I know we have just chewed up. I appreciate everyone hanging for as long as they have. We have chewed up a tremendous amount of time on this topic today. What I wanted to make sure we got out here, and then like I said, as a follow-up, we'll send out the recording. I'll also have a PDF of this presentation. We put in a couple of links that we think are really helpful. One, our primary alert documentation, just on docs.vmware.com, that talk through a lot of what we went over. There is a guide specifically on the metrics, properties, and alert definitions that are available out of the box. Another good, just piece of reference material. VM Ignite, there's a ton of great content out here. Highly recommend checking out the entire blog, but certainly the alerts, do's, and don'ts. Some great ideas and just basic methodology. The VMware Ops Guide. Again, if you're running vSphere, running operations, definitely recommend that. There are actual metrics that you can download. Again, a guide that can show you the metrics that are being collected. Again, to give you some ideas of what you can potentially alert against. And then I always put all the recordings to previous Powerblocks or webinars that I've done up on my YouTube channel. So some shameless self-promotion. Anything else you want to add at the moment, Tony?
Actually, I just used the second bullet point this morning, the Aria Operations metrics, properties, and alert definitions for one of my clients. We were looking at an alert definition, and we were trying to figure out what it was. But when we went to that alert definition in the website, actually, I pulled down the PDF and searched on it. It actually told us exactly what the issue was, so and what the recommendations were. So it was kind of nice to have that right there in front of you. And the other good one, other than Lon's website, is the Ops Guide metrics. That's really, in my mind, important for everyone to know more about Aria Operations itself, where it breaks down all the metrics, all those hundreds of metrics, or thousands probably of metrics that we have, and it makes it a little more digestible to understand what they mean. And that was always something that I couldn't really figure out. But one of our colleagues, Ewan, he wrote out both the VMware Ops Guide, which is great, and that vSphere Metrics Guide.
Yep. So with that, I think this is probably a pretty good point to stop. I know we're almost at the top of the hour. So thank you all for joining. Really appreciate you spending an hour with us. Hopefully this was helpful. Certainly, like I said, we'll be sending out the follow-up. If we missed a question, we'll try to get to that as well. if you have any questions, by all means, reach out to Tony or I. And just thanks a lot for spending some time with us this morning. Really appreciate it. Go ahead and stop recording.